So hello, everybody. Good Chodesh, Chodesh Tov. Can a few more people put on their videos, please, for that, for bring and feeling? Come on, be brave. Oh, look, someone is appearing. Come on, videos. It makes a big difference. It gives me that feeling of live people, but we're all together. Great. Thank you, thank you. Okay, wow, we're right on time. So we're going to just review a little bit because the next chapter is so exciting. But we'll review a little bit. So for those book owners, happy book owners, we're at page 98. We're on the last couple of pages of chapter 8. We'll just review a little and then we have 2 new paragraphs to do before we turn the page. Okay, so 98. So at the end of the top paragraph is speaking about using food and drink in honor of Shabbos, or to open our hearts in the study of Torah, and performing mitzvahs with joy. And the footnote there is to chapter 7 in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe, that's the famous chapter where he speaks about how Rabbi would tell a joke to the students in the beginning of the class, and all the students would laugh. And the Alter Rebbe brings that down because it's good to tell jokes. I'll try to think of one in the middle. It's good to tell jokes. It's good to up the vibes. It's good to be happy. And he speaks about the sages were using wine and fragrance to awaken themselves to learning Torah v'simcha. I wonder if anyone copyrighted the fragrance. I'm sure. The sage's fragrance. If you have the recipe, put it up in the chat group. We can all use that fragrance. Okay, so the middle of the page. In contrast, when we reach the stage of sweetening and have, I've underlined the next word, extricated ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego, we'll go over that, we may indeed begin to savor all the delights Hashem has placed in the world for our enjoyment. So there's a lot of words here. Extricated ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego now. So that is a lifetime job. Sometimes there's moments, the Beit does have moments of extricating ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego, but it's a lifetime job. We always, I guess it can get a little more rectified as we go along, but it's like, and then we can savor all the delights Hashem has placed in the world. So we can get our hedonist, our inner hedonist to help rectify our ego so it can get more pleasure out of Hashem's pleasures. In this context, the advice of the sage is to sanctify yourself with regard to that which is permitted to you, in quotes, means infuse your holy attitude towards life in all the pleasures permitted you. So pleasure and holiness can go together very nicely once we've extricated ourselves from the unrectified ego. At this level, all our deeds are truly and intrinsically for the sake of heaven. So everything can be done, everything. This is how Hasidic thought interprets Shlomo HaMelech's directive, know him in all your ways. And the sage's assertion that we will eventually be called to account for all the pleasures that we could have enjoyed in this world but abstained from. So we're supposed to elevate those sparks. You know, they say, the sages could, when dinner was set out before them, they could see in the food where the sparks were. They didn't. That's the new diet. When you look at your food, check out where the sparks are and eat there. Get those sparks, because we're supposed to elevate the sparks. Birurim. We'll talk more about that. And that's a quote from the Kedushin Yerushalmi, that we have to elevate the sparks that are assigned to us. For fun. The Torah's sanctioned sweetening of life gives Hashem great pleasure, so to speak, because after all, he created this world as a vehicle for giving pleasure to his creatures. Now, this is the famous quote from the Arizal from Eitz Chaim, that Hashem, when we're doing Torah sanctioned, having Torah sanctioned pleasures, it gives Hashem pleasure. Hashem wants us to have pleasure, Torah sanctioned pleasures. because Hashem created this world as a vehicle for giving pleasure to his creatures. I think it's a very important idea that it's good to educate from a young age so that we understand that Hashem wants us. It's a mitzvah to have a good time in Torah sanctified pleasures. Still, we cannot enjoy the world in the way Hashem intended us to unless we have reached the level of constant awareness of his presence in our lives. So from the beginning, this is what Rav Yitzchak's book has been speaking about, that the very first hachna'ah of hachna'ah, the first stage of submission, the first of the 9 stages, is meditating on the greatness of God, even if it's for 30 seconds. But this is the more we're aware of his presence in our lives, the more we could enjoy these Torah-sanctioned pleasures. So we're going to keep on working on that as we go along. Okay, top of 9. So this is now new. That was the review from last time, and now new exciting material. Okay. We can be constantly aware of Hashem, even as we enjoy the pleasures of his world, only insofar as we have accomplished the goals of separation. So let's speak about separation. Remember, we learned in this chapter, we can't skip separation, even though it seems like it might be fun to go from hachna'ah, submission, to hamtakah, sweetening. We have to go through separation. We spoke about different levels of separation. There's, first of all, separation between good and evil. There's a good one. That the Torah has this absolute standards of good and evil. And we also spoke about it in more subtle ways, that evil could be, besides our wanting to do, the first level of evil is our wanting to do what the Torah says we shouldn't do. Shame about that. The second evil is psychological complexes that keep us from fulfilling our shlichus. We have to recognize them. And whatever embitters our life, that's what we have to learn how to sweeten. So separation of good and evil is one separation. We spoke about the separation of past and present. Remember, what was, which is a lifetime. It's like, it's a constant fight. What was wants to overcome our consciousness and to be able to say, this is not happening right now. And then, of course, there's the separation between the divine soul and the animal soul, that we have to slowly make that separation. The more we identify with the divine soul, the more we can objectively look at our animal soul. So we have to do that. We have to work on that separation. Once we have experienced the true delight of being close to God, the superficial enticements of this world no longer impress us, and we no longer feel compelled to exert ourselves to obtain them and indulge in them. So the true delight of being close to God, intimacy with God, which reminds me of something I wanted to share, something I learned from Rav Effie this week, Effie Ehrenberg in his Tanya class, chapter 1 of Tanya. He mentions, when the Alter Rebbe, chapter 1 is really a lot of perplexing questions, but one of the things that when the Alter Rebbe is trying to point out what is the definition of the Beinoni, and what it's not, he points out, is a legal definition. All of the 3 terms, how the Alter Rebbe defines Rasha, Tzaddik, Beinoni, is not in terms of legal definitions, because if someone is more good than bad, that's the guy that's going to win the court case, but that doesn't mean that person is a tzaddik. So he spoke about it's not in terms of reward and punishment, and he said something very interesting. So we do things out of reward and punishment. That's a chitzonius relationship with Hashem, to get a bigger burger in Olam Haba. Like, are we doing our avoda to get a bigger burger in Olam Haba? Or do we want an intimate relationship with Hashem? So he gave a mashal about our relationship, an intimate relationship. So we need the structure. Halacha is the structure of the relationship. And then Chassidus opens us to having an intimate relationship with Hashem. And he gave a mashal of a husband who washes the dishes, takes out the garbage. See what he brings the child to the kindergarten, picks up the child, does all of these things, but two minutes a week he abuses his wife. So is he a tzaddik? Is he not according to the Alter Rebbe, but it's the idea we can get the structure of our relationship with Hashem. We can get the halacha down, but do we have an intimate relationship? Are we sacrificing our intimate relationship with our thoughts that don't give Hashem a place to dwell in our minds? So the true delight of being close to Hashem, this is what we're here for. Let's make a l'chaim on that. We should experience the true delight of intimacy with Hashem. L'chaim. Okay, well, it's so nice. We have 42 people with us tonight. That's beautiful. Okay, last paragraph. At this stage, when we do indulge in some physical enjoyment, we do so in an essentially liberated way. We experience the pleasure as pure and unadulterated instead of the fulfillment of some artificial need. More importantly, since we are in no way captives of the pleasure in which we indulge, we can freely experience it as part of our overall connection to Hashem. So pleasure is freely experienced as part of our overall connection to Hashem. So this goes back to advertise to the inner, the inner hedonist. Want more pleasure in life? Then we must, as it says on the previous page, extricate ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego. So there we go. So we should all be blessed to do that and stay there and not fall back so easily. Okay, now it's very exciting. We're turning the page to a new chapter. And the chapter 9, is called The Therapist at Work, but it could also be the good friend at work, the mentor at work, the educator at work, the parent at work. So let's find out. The therapist's qualifications. Let's find out. As we noted earlier, the role of the counselor or therapist can be filled by one's spouse, a close friend, or a spiritual mentor or advisor. In other words, it's possible that two close friends could be each other's therapists. It's like but we're going to find out more about this therapist. Whoever fulfills this role can best do so if he or she has conscientiously and earnestly endeavored to study, internalize, and fulfill the teachings of Kabbalah and Hasidus in his daily life. By persistently refining our own character, so here's a characteristic. If we want to be a good therapist for our friends, we have to persistently refine our own character, and especially by practicing and acquiring humility through ongoing self-examination, a person acquires the ability to understand and assist those who seek his counsel. So acquiring humility through ongoing self-examination. So this is shiftless. And remember, we don't want to confuse shiftless with low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is still me-centered. I hate myself. I'm a horrible person. I have low self-esteem. But it's still ego-centered. It's still the unrectified ego. And what we want is true humility, which is not feeling better than other people. The Alter Rebbe devotes all of chapter 30 of Tanya to speaking about this, that it really means, the Alter Rebbe says, he quotes Pirkei Avos, be humble before every person, and he adds, afilu kal shebakali mamish, even the lowest of the low mamish. So, and he gives us even a coaching tool, how to feel humble before the lowest of the low, is to put yourself in their shoes. The Alter Rebbe says, don't judge someone till you've walked a mile in their shoes, which means feel their Yetzer Hara, feel what they have to battle, feel how much energy they would have to put in to battle their Yetzer Hara. And we ask ourselves, am I putting in that much energy? So the Alter Rebbe says, am I putting in that much energy in doing good, that much energy, or am I putting that much energy into fighting my own bad? So if I'm not, there's no reason to feel better than that person. And if we don't want to walk in their shoes, because sometimes we meet people, it just would seem too painful to walk in their shoes, even for a few minutes. So then the Alter Rebbe says, don't judge them. If we don't want to walk in their shoes, don't judge them. So don't judge is choice too. But this is the idea, acquiring humility through ongoing self-examination. This is to be the therapist. The therapist has to certainly feel that he's not better, as he has to feel humble before the person we're giving advice to feel humble. So there's a good rule. We can only give advice to someone that we feel we're on the same level, not that we're better than them in any way. So acquiring humility, and then we'll be able to understand people who seek our counsel. This is somewhat similar to the requirement in conventional psychoanalysis that every psychoanalyst himself undergoes psychoanalysis. So we're not saying to undergo psychoanalysis, but to develop shiftless, to develop this humility is the prerequisite. I think that's a very interesting idea, that is really the beginning. That's stage one, that we don't feel better than other people. At first glance, continuing the second paragraph on 101, at first glance, it would seem that a truly humble person would shun the role of guiding the spiritual growth of others. After all, isn't it presumptuous for us to assume that we have internalized the necessary teachings enough to be able to guide someone else who has not progressed as far along the way? Shouldn't the spiritually oriented person be wary of the inevitable feelings of self-satisfaction that come with successfully solving other people's problems? ? Here's the answer. To the contrary, the truly humble person will humble himself before the truth. He will be as aware of his own experience, gifts, and talents as he will be of his shortcomings and the long road still ahead. So we have to acknowledge our experience, gifts, and talents. We can't just hide them under a bucket. We also have shortcomings and a long road ahead, but we also have to see the gifts and talents that Hashem gave us. Moreover, he will give no thought to his own interests and the spiritual risks that helping others entails. When called upon, he will assume the role of counselor with grace and conviction and not evade his responsibility for reasons of false modesty. So this is giving us encouragement. We shouldn't evade our responsibility. Now, here's how the Rebbe put it. As the Lubavitcher Rebbe put it, if all a person knows is the first letter of the Aleph base, he's obligated to teach someone who doesn't know that. So this idea is something the Rebbe would say all the time. If you know Aleph and base, go and teach somebody Aleph. And in the Rebbe saying that, there's a huge amount of, I just want to share, if it's like an adult who is becoming frum and they don't know Aleph base, and you help them learn Aleph base, help them learn Aleph. There's tremendous energy there. I mean, the Rebbe was telling us where there's tremendous energy, because somebody laboring to learn, an adult laboring to learn Aleph base, Gimel, is a huge amount of energy. And it's the equivalent of a great sage learning the deepest secrets of Torah, and it's a big mitzvah to help someone. So that's talking about in terms of beginning to learn how to learn. And also, the same idea applies. If we're able to, if someone comes to us, if someone seeks our counsel, we have a responsibility to try to help them. And now we're getting the guidelines. So guideline number 1 is to be humble. Okay, let's do more. In any case, the assured resolution of the problem can never be ascribed solely to the sensitivity and good advice of the counselor or therapist, because the person seeking help plays an active role in the discussion of the problem and the effort to solve it. In other words, we're working on it together. The therapist, the mentor, the friend should feel that the two of us are working on it together. It's a project we're both working on. In effect, then, the divine souls of both join together in the struggle. The odds are thus weighed in favor of good, and evil effectively has no chance. So this is the famous idea. When we get together with our friend to solve our problems, it's 2 divine souls against 1 animal soul. Wow, it's this beautiful rain falling on the green hills of Eretz Yisrael right now, the rain that we prayed for. I don't know if you can hear it, if the sounds, you can hear it, yes? Great, Baruch Hashem. Holy rain of Eretz Yisrael, yay, that we prayed for. So this is the idea, and it helps in the humbling to know it's not like the counselor is finding the answer. Both people are working together to find the best advice for the situation. Chassidus is so confident in the human ability to overcome evil and ultimately transform it into good, providing the requisite conditions have been met, and attaches such great importance to this endeavor that it considers it the central challenge of any true educator, counselor, therapist, or mentor. So the human ability to overcome evil and ultimately transform it to good. And this is, this was the Alter Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe came up with the revolutionary concept of the Beinani, which is in a sense one level, the average person, the Alter Rebbe had a lot of faith in us average people that we could for a moment be a Beinani, that we could know the thoughts that we're thinking and decide which thought to follow. So it's a very big deal. Chassidus has a lot of faith in us that we can overcome evil. Isn't that great? Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe had faith in us. The Alter Rebbe has faith in us. The Rebbes, the Rebbeim have faith in us. And we have to have faith in each other that we have the ability to overcome evil and ultimately transform it into good. Since we are laden from birth with predominantly animalistic drives and tendencies, weeding them out is considered the first goal the sincere and dedicated educator should set for himself vis-a-vis his charges. So weeding out those animalistic drives, we do need to weed out those animalistic drives in people that we're trying to help and ourselves, of course. His responsibility in this regard is grave indeed. If he does not succeed in rectifying his pupils' negative character traits, he will only make them worse by having exposed these traits. In other words, this fits in when we spoke about the idea of focusing on the good in people. Focusing on the good in people strengthens the good. If we're going to before pointing out something negative, it has to be something that someone is ready to hear. It has to be something that someone is ready to hear. Otherwise, it's not worth pointing it out. I mean, this is where a certain sensitivity comes into place. Okay. Dear. The neighbors are coming for their dogs. This is really village life. You're getting to hear it all. Mary, could you close the door, dear? Okay. So bottom line on 102. The biblical role model every Hasidic educator, counselor, or therapist should set for himself is, again, Yosef. So we're going to speak more about Yosef. As the archetypal dreamer and dream interpreter of the Torah, Yosef embodies the ability to, now get this, Yosef embodies the ability to reorder the chaotic meanderings of the unrectified imagination or subconscious into meaningful messages that serve as keys to the hidden recesses of the heart and mind. So the ability to reorder the chaotic meanderings of the unrectified imagination. That's what Yosef is able to do. And we're going to find out how he was able to do that. Yosef was able to do this more than any other biblical figure because he had successfully wrestled with sexual temptation. So why was he able to reorder the chaotic meanderings of the unrectified imagination? He had successfully wrestled with sexual temptation. And the famous story of Yosef, everyone knows that there he was 17 years old. He was a slave. His brothers had sold him into slavery. Geveret Potiphar, who I heard from Y.Y. Jacobson, had an eye for quality people. And I always felt there weren't so many quality people in Mitzrayim. I mean, ever since I heard this, I've always felt much more sympathetic for her. What can you do? Finally, a quality person comes her way. And she threatened to blind him, to cast him into prison, which she did, to kill him. Everyone was doing it in Mitzrayim. If you've ever heard the line, everyone is doing it. Everyone was doing it. No one would have known. They weren't going to say in the Makolet the next day that they knew his bubby in Leningrad and she did the same thing. No, no one would know. How could a 17-year-old boy have not given in? And the sages say he saw the image of his father reflected. And on one level, what the Rebbe said, that means that he saw how his father saw him. And his father saw him as a spiritual giant, and he arose to the occasion. So Yosef successfully wrestled with sexual temptation. In Egypt, a land famous for its licentiousness and sexual depravity, it would have been the simplest and most natural thing for him to indulge in any of the plethora of sexual enticements. Yet the Torah relates that he resisted the overtures of his master's wife. For this reason, Jewish tradition calls him Yosef HaTzadik. And they say, it says Yosef fled, Vayanes, he fled. And the story is, everyone knows the story, that before the sea was created, Hashem made a deal with the sea that it had to split when the Jewish people got there 2,448 years later. And the sea said, who am I splitting for? And Hashem showed the sea the souls of the Jews as they are in Shemayim before coming down in the world. And the sea was just in love, of course, for these people. I'll be happy to split. And then we arrived at the sea and we weren't getting along, and everyone was fighting. Some people wanted to jump in the sea and commit suicide. Some wanted to go back to Mitzrayim. It was a whole big balagan. And Hashem says to the sea, okay, now split. And the sea says, for who? Nitzel Bezakt. It was a Yiddish speaking sea. This is not the same thing you showed me before. And then it says, the sea saw the bones of Yosef, and the sea split. V'yanes hayam, the sea fled. Because Yosef, it's a very big deal that he was able to do this, and he was able to reorder the chaotic meanderings of the unrectified imagination. I guess that's what it means to interpret dreams. And he found meaningful messages. Beautiful. Okay, so we're continuing. The middle of page 103. Modern psychology has correctly verified that many, if not most, neuroses and even psychoses are connected with and derived from sexual perversion, which itself is the consequence of an unrectified ego. And this idea is like, it's so, we're not being politically correct here. It's like the whole society is saying, as we all know what it's saying. And the Torah is taking a stand. The Torah is saying what's right and what's wrong. But here's a very interesting idea and a very interesting way to explain it. So let's continue. According to Kabbalah, each of us is half of a soul and is separated at conception into male and female components. We are all therefore born with a natural urge to find our lost soulmate. Please underline that, a natural urge to find our lost soulmate. This is a very important, we have a natural urge. This urge lies at the bottom of our sense of sexuality. Ideally, we should channel the power of this urge into finding our lost soulmate, on whom we then focus our sexuality exclusively. So it's, people are very lucky who can channel the power of this urge into finding our lost soulmate, on whom we then focus our sexuality exclusively. However, in our subconscious impatience to reunite with our other half, we may succumb to delusions that entice us with the promise of sexual fulfillment. A subconscious impatience, it's really can be very helpful for people to have this information. This seems like very important basic information that people need to grow up with, because we don't want to have subconscious impatience to reunite with our other half and therefore fall into delusions that entice us with the promise of sexual fulfillment. But since these illusions are not our real soulmate, they will only frustrate us and derail our sexual energy. So these illusions are not our real soulmates. So it leads to frustration and a derailing of energy. Such subconscious confusion often undermines our psychological well-being throughout life. And we know people like that. Conversely, by staying true to our quest for our true soulmate, we can largely preserve our psychological clarity. So this seems like basic 101 mental health, staying true to our quest for our true soulmates and preserve our psychological clarity. When we were speaking about this morning, someone brought up as a question how difficult it is to explain this to someone who feels, that they're right in what they're doing, that the society says they're right. So we spoke about, in general, we can't really, a person has to feel that we're saying, whatever we're saying to them, we're saying out of concern and love for them, that we're not giving them some party line. It has to be that the person feels loved. Before you can tell someone, share information with someone that goes so against what society says is okay and what they might think on some level is okay. It has the first thing is to be friends with the person in a deep way. And then because the person has to feel, we know when it's been successfully transmitted, when someone says, I know you're only saying this to me out of deep concern for me. Even if they disagree at that point, at least that message is being given over. So these are all ideas that are very important. So what are we saying? Just to go over these ideas. So Yosef was the dream interpreter because he had the ability to reorder the chaotic meanderings of the unrectified imagination into meaningful messages. Isn't that interesting? I think that's, for advertising for a dream interpreter, I think we should ask for someone who can reorder the chaotic meanderings, no, of the unrectified imagination into meaningful messages. Yes, I'm going to put that into the help wanted. And why was he able to do this? Because he successfully wrestled with sexual temptation. He resisted the overtures of his master's wife. And so much pain and suffering comes from the perversions of the unrectified ego. So Hashem should bless us all, bless the Jewish people, bless all of us to be successful in these endeavors. So I wanted to share something about Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is this coming Shabbos. So a lot of this is known, but I'll just say a little bit. Or you can hear the rain of Eretz Yisrael falling on our tin roof. So Yud Shvat is the day that the previous Rebbe, known as the Friedricher Rebbe in Yiddish, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, passed away on Yud Shvat. It was also the date that his grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka, passed away. He was very, very close with her. She had a tremendous influence on his growing up. The stories she told. She was the wife of the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe, the Friedricher Rebbe's grandmother. And he actually, this mimer, the mimer that the Friedricher Rebbe gave out to be learned on Yud Shvat, his grandmother's yurtzeit, which turned out to be his own yurtzeit, was called Bati Lagani, from Shir Hashirim. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride, Bati Lagani. And the Friedricher Rebbe, this was his last will and testament. And he's someone who went through so much suffering in life. He was tortured by the communists. He was in the Warsaw bombing. He lost a daughter in Treblinka. I mean, he went through the suffering of the Jewish people of that century. And his last mimer could have been from Eicha, I am the man who has seen all the suffering in the world. But instead he chose Bati Lagani, I've come to my garden, that we have to make this world into a beautiful garden, that this world has the potential to be a beautiful garden. Basi Lagani. It had 20 chapters. And so this was 1950 when the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. And for a whole year, the Hasidim were trying to convince the Rebbe to take on the job of Rebbe. He wasn't so interested in taking on this job, but he finally agreed. And how he agreed was that on Yud Shvat, the first Yurtzeit, the first anniversary of the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, he gave a mimer, a serious Hasidic discourse. And that's how, that only a Rebbe gives a Hasidic discourse called a mimer. There are more informal discourses called sichas, but this was a mimer. And the mimer was on Basi Lagani. It was called Basi Lagani. And each year, the Rebbe gave a mimer on Yud Shvat on one of the chapters of Basi Lagani. So there's 20 chapters. So 1970 was the first time that all 20 chapters had been learned. And then it started again, learning a chapter every year. So this year we continue on. And the custom was for the Hasidim to learn the Maimorim that the Rebbe gave on that oath. So this year, this is the 11th year. So this would be we learned chapter 11 this year. So 1961, the Rebbe gave 2 Maimorim on Yud Shvat, on chapter 11 of Basi Lagani. And that's like what the in-crowd, that's what the Hasidim are speaking about this year, chapter 11 of Basi Lagani. And it speaks a lot about Netzach, the quality of the sphere of Netzach. We have Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. So the Rebbe is speaking about Netzach and the name of Hashem, one of the 7 names of Hashem is connected with all the spheros, and the one connected with Netzach is Hashem Tzivakos. The word, if you put the word before, if you say Tzivos Hashem, well, that's us, the army of Hashem, the Jewish people. Hashem said he was taking Tzivos Hashem, the army of Hashem, out of Mitzrayim. But when you say Hashem first, Hashem Tzivakos, it's one of the 7 names that can't be pronounced unless you're in prayer, and it can't be erased, one of the 7 names of God that shouldn't be erased. So this is the name connected with Netzach. And the Rebbe speaks about Netzach, victory, how it's such a part of the essence of the soul, that there's a kind of victory that a king will do for booty, for spoil, to take the spoil. And that represents like the sparks. Remember we talked about the sparks we're supposed to elevate? In the Ben & Jerry's ice cream, you can just pick out the Clovis roll, of course, pick out the 2 sparks meant for you to elevate the sparks. That's the booty. And there's a level of victory just to get his will should be revealed. That's like the deeper level. And that's the victory where we want alignment. It's not like, it's 2 spouses are fighting and one is going to be right and one is going to be wrong. And there's no real feeling of any real victory there. But if it winds up with alignment, if it lines up with oneness, that's the real victory. That's the higher victory of Netzach. People with a sense of serenity, everyone wins, true Netzach. So that's what was being spoken about. And the Rebbe would always, say a few lines from each of give like a summary of the previous chapters. So I'm putting it high on the list. You can actually see Basi Lagani. You can see it in English on Chabad.org. You can read the whole mimer if you don't have the book. And the Maimorim of the Rebbe are also, can also see them. They're being taught by some great teachers in preparation. So this coming Shabbos is an Eis Ratzon. It represents the day that the Rebbe accepted the being Rebbe. So it's a big deal, and this is 70 years since that 1951, since the Rebbe gave the first mimer on Basi Lagani. It was really tremendous simcha for the Hasidim, having a Rebbe. After that year that it wasn't clear exactly, groups of Hasidim would go to the graveyard of the previous Rebbe in Queens and daven that the Rebbe shouldn't run away, that he should agree to be Rebbe, because Hasidim do need a Rebbe. So Basi Lagani, Achasi Kala. This is, it's an Ace Rutzon. The Rebbe would always say to use an Ace Rutzon, to not waste an Ace Rutzon. It's an auspicious time. It's an auspicious time. It's Basil Gani. They say it's the Rosh Hashanah of his kashrus, of connection to a Rebbe. And we want this connection. We want this connection to the Rebbe. The Rebbe should be connected with us. Basi Lagani is a good day. And we also have to include that this class, as all of our classes, should be for the Refuah Shalem of Rabbi Yitzchak. Yitzchak Feivish ben Braina Malka should go from strength to strength. He should feel better and better, so he should continue teaching us all of the wonderful things he teaches us of the Panemius of Torah, which is for us having an intimate relationship with Hashem. So that's Panemius of Torah. There's Nigla of Torah, which is the structure, like the guy who takes out the garbage and washes the dishes and takes the child to Gan. But we also need the inner part. We also need the intimacy with Hashem. So this is what we're going towards on Yud Shvat, that we should all feel that it's a time to strengthen our intimate relationship with Hashem, and we should all do it together. So I want to take a picture for our Get Well card for Rav Yitzchak. So if more people could put on their cameras, don't be shy, get in that smiling, get well. This is beautiful. Come on. We still have room for another 4 people, 3 people, 2 people, 1 last person. Yes. Look at this. I feel like I've just won the lottery. Okay. I've gotten very talented. I think I'm able to take a picture on my computer. See, I did it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you everybody really for gathering. This is, Baruch Hashem, we've had a chance. So next Sunday, we shall continue. And don't forget Yud Shvat to light a candle for the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rav Yosef Yitzchak ben Admor Yosef Yitzchak ben Admor Shalom Dovber B'Shter Nasara. He should have an Aliyah Neshama. We can connect ourselves to him and feel everyone connected to the Frierdiker Rebbe can feel the Aliyah of Yud Shvat. So thank you so much. I love you all. It's wonderful to see everybody.